Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Todd McFarlane Day. We're looking at early Todd McFarlane on The Incredible Hulk, issue 338, cover dated December 1987. Todd McFarlane, not yet the superstar that he will become in the comics industry, but definitely this issue contains, I think, the first kind of clear examples of McFarlaneisms and stylistic tics that he would become kind of famous for, starting to shine through even though someone else is inking him. But that's for the interiors. Again, this cover done by a stock kind of 80s Marvel artist. The character introduced, I think, in this issue, not 100%, but the design that McFarlane does is completely different from the one on the cover here. So I suspect that he came up with the original design, and by he, I mean Todd McFarlane. Whoever drew this cover went with a very kind of typical Marvel John Buscema style kind of lady here, which is fine. But obviously McFarlane's going to be changing things up artistically, and this issue is a good example of that. Again, even though he's being inked by someone else, a lot of his style is shining through, and I'm going to point that out as we go through the issue, as opposed to maybe his early issues of Amazing Spider-Man that were inked by Bob McLeod, which is later than this, right? And man, that really, those first two issues he does, 299, 98, 99, I believe, really look more like Marvel house style than Todd McFarlane, even as opposed to compared to this issue here, which I think looks more like Todd McFarlane than those first couple of Amazing Spider-Man issues. Anyways, we'll stop talking about it, look at someone else's art, and let's look at some Todd McFarlane stuff. So right off the bat with this first page here, introducing this kind of lady character who's got kind of magical dreamlike powers. I'm not quite sure. She has the power to mystify or something. She's like a gypsy. or hypnotizer or something, but the way McFarlane draws her, definitely she has that gypsy kind of vibe, and also kind of an elven look in the elongated face, and just strange Todd McFarlane proportions. So looking over this page here, even though it's been inked by someone else, you can see some of that noodling start to shine through, as if the inker is kind of, you know, starting to get on board or on the same page as Todd McFarlane, and kind of following more what he's laying down rather than to try to, I guess, Marvelize it at that point, or Marvel house style is impose the Marvel house style on top of his art. So for me already, in this black border that he's already started doing in the earlier issues, but he's starting to, you know, divide the page up into more interesting kind of panels, right? Not just down the middle, and still doing about the same amount of panels, but just in, you know, varied configurations that are a little more intricate than the typical, you know, full you know, splash. Then you've got kind of 3 rows, right? And then you've got the 9 grid. He's kind of finding different ways to split that up that, you know, are not conventional in and around that era, even though this still looks fairly kind of standard as a comic book page. So like a cleaner McFarlane, I guess. And then boom, I don't think it's mentioned enough that I do think Todd McFarlane probably, this is a hypothesis on my part, but I certainly feel like he encountered manga at some point, right? Or excuse me, manga. He definitely swiped some backgrounds from Akira on some of his Spawn images and some Batman stuff on here too. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised that all this kind of speed lines and action lines and perspective lines that he's using here is definitely pulled from some sort of manga that he's had a look at, and that the influence of that on his artwork, not just in swiping backgrounds, but in incorporating some of that into his art. I feel like that's what we're getting here. It's almost like early American manga or something. Pretty good movement, you know what I mean? Perspective, foreshortening. All of this, just for some reason, kind of reminds me of Fists of the North Star, maybe even swiping this pose here, even though, you know, the rendering itself is much more American. Anyways, just an idea on my part. Peter David's the writer, Todd McFarlane's the penciler, Jim Sanders 3 is the inker, Rick Parker's the letterer, and Petra Scotise is the colorist. So yeah, again, in the inking, even though it's fairly clean, we're starting to get more of that noodling and hatching line from McFarlane kind of shining through. Bit more of the cartooniness in the posing of the figures. And here on this page is like, even compared to last issue, I feel like, you know, for 1987 Marvel, he's really pushing it here. And where's he getting these ideas? I definitely feel like a lot of this, again, is manga inspired, right? The look of this, the lines emanating from her figure here, even these kind of layouts and, you know, symbolic kind of use of imagery here to suggest that the Hulk dying, right? Just all of it screams to me manga. And maybe that's where he was getting some of those early ideas that then, you know, he kind of warped and twisted into his own. But the broken up kind of border You know, I don't know how common that was around this period. I'm not saying he's the first to do it, but he's definitely using and abusing it all over this page. And is it me, or is this like, you know, where Rob Liefeld learned to draw a mouth from this angle, right? That feels like Liefeld swiped just that from McFarlane. Now I kind of see it when people talk about a McFarlane influence on Rob Liefeld. Okay, gonna point it out right away. Two things. This ugly ass jumpsuit, and someone actually, when I get to the hospital scene, I'll point it out, but I gotta remember that. Remember this jumpsuit deal. And going through this issue, I thought it was interesting. First of all, Rick looks like Rick Springfield. That's who I always feel he's modeled on, at least for a while there in the early 80s. Late 70s. I'm not quite sure. I'm not like super down on my Rick Springfield. Can't even say his name right. But I'm going to talk about, again, how I think Todd McFarlane's probably, I figured out maybe he's looking at, back in the day, if you wanted to see a lot of toys, you would look at, you know, the toy section in the Sears catalog or something. And you could, you know, when I was a kid, I'd look at that before Christmas and figure out what kind of Christmas gifts I wanted. I feel like he's doing that here in around 1987, which is around the time I'm playing with these kind of toys. So some of them just to me look somewhat familiar. Like, is this, you know, a Transformer or G.I. Joe toy? I'm not quite sure, but if you know, let me know in the comments. But this definitely right here, and I only noticed it going through this issue later, but I'm pointing out that it does appear earlier here. That is definitely Optimus Prime, the toy, 100%. And he's just looking at that for the design here, and that's what he's using. I'm pretty much convinced of this. And again, storytelling wise, like, you know, really breaking up panels in a different way than what we've seen before at Marvel. Slowly but sure, it still looks, again, fairly standard, but he's just breaking away ever so slightly. And I'm not saying he's the first to do this, but he's definitely starting to push it more than he was before. We've talked about this idea that McFarlane has mentioned many times before. You come in and you kind of, you know, draw kind of bit stock, and then slowly but surely you incorporate your design ideas and things that you think, you know, will work better. And I feel like he's slowly doing that here. Back of these lights, right? Definitely like the A-Team's van. Still that great technology here, inked slightly differently by our buddy Jim Sanders III, the third, but I still think works really well and still looks very McFarlane-y. Yeah, so there's this scene in the hospital. I was talking about the jumpsuit. There we go. I'm not the only one, so this gentleman here, you there in the jumpsuit, no running, this is a hospital. So literally pointing out that, what is a jumpsuit exactly? Is it some, originally like some form of athletic gear? Is it literally a suit for like the long jump or the high jump or something? Or is it just like, for some reason, you know, a one-piece outfit is more conducive to jumping? I'm not quite sure. Again, look at that design on this Elven character. I don't even know her name. I don't particularly care, but all of this to me is such like McFarlane proportions and cartooniness, right? Even up here. And he's, you know, incorporating the black border into a page that just has, you know, regular panels here, breaking this one down into two parts, you know, not something you would see commonly back then. Even over here, just this one panel being a little narrower. Just it seems like it's little things, but these are kind of the building blocks of what McFarlane's style will become. Again, the inking here, I mean, this is definitely very McFarlane, but this too, this not so much. This not at all really. In the inking, does it really remind me of McFarlane? But the framing, right, and the fact the eyes are a little bit bigger, maybe again from the manga influence, I'm not quite sure. But this cropping here is very McFarlane. So I'm starting to see those little tricks that he's going to use to greater effect, I guess, or to more graphic effect later on. Here's another cool shot that's very McFarlane in its design, right? The kind of profile shot of Bruce Banner screaming, the three-part transition into the Hulk, very cool. A lot of the little bits of smoke on the ground and hatching, right, which definitely originate from Todd McFarlane's pencils on these ones, on these pages. Using a stark kind of black background here when she appears. Like I said, it adds to that almost elven, magical kind of... he's using design tricks, you know, that wouldn't usually be used. Again, the Todd McFarlane-isms that he's developing. Broken up border, once again, all the way throughout. Soon as she actually attacks them, right, with these kind of, I don't know, psychic, dreamlike daggers. Not quite sure what's going on there. And then we got Optimus Prime showing up again. Tell me that's not Optimus Prime, right? And these vehicles here, pretty cool, very 80s, the flying car kind of motif. I'm not quite sure how this works storytelling wise, but I think it works graphically, right? Two opposed teams and just, you know, cutting out the distance between them. Left and right, yin and yang. Simple, effective, you know, graphic tools. Yeah, these whole pages here, these insert panels over top of this one, the layering, starting to see that McFarlane layering. Panels over others, right, just to create those foreground, middle ground, background elements. And I mean, most of it, this is a pretty funny sequence where she just, I'm not quite sure why, you know, I guess Peter David's the writer, so he wrote, like, she turns into a big glob of goop or something, so that's an odd choice. But yeah, so basically Hulk can't really fight it or her in this form because it's going up his nose and stuff. So the Hulk starts breaking open the gas station, basically to douse himself in petrol, gasoline, and lighting up a flare here to blow himself up and get the sludge off of him. Once again, definitely a McFarlane panel here. Even in the inking, I feel like, again, this is one instance where Jim Sanders has been pretty faithful to what McFarlane's probably laid down. Maybe he's doing some thicker lines back here, but definitely that delicate kind of McFarlane line is present in the explosion and the debris and stuff, and it really screams McFarlane to me. So again, this is probably the first kind of truest McFarlane-y issue that's come out of the Incredible Hulk yet. This pose for sure. And there's, I noticed it on this page here. Maybe it's a deadline issue or something. So by the end, and there's only a few pages left, maybe two. Yeah, literally 2 pages. Maybe McFarlane loses a bit of steam and some of the detail is lost, and more of that is being taken over, I feel like, by the inker, Jim Sanders, right? And the line's a bit thicker and there's not quite as much noodling. It's a lot more controlled, right? And it's as if I could be mistaken on this, but I'm pretty sure that this same inker, Jim Sanders III, also inked Keith Giffen in the 80s. And there's something akin to some of the Keith Giffen stuff from the 80s that I remember reading that I see in kind of the way the shadow's been dropped and stuff. And it's almost like I feel maybe McFarlane sees this and incorporates more of that into his art as far as shadowing goes. Because as you'll see soon with the kind of first issue where he inks himself on this, he's just throwing down no shadows at all. It's all just line work. So I feel like early McFarlane is also a little shy about laying down some thick shadows, which eventually he will do, and which will just improve his artwork. Yeah, but there's something akin to that 80s Giffen here that I kind of see. I could be wrong. And destroyed Optimus Prime once again, and that's basically the end of our issue with this trucker driving off and meeting up once again with this young lady, the elven face once again present, and definitely this whole panel here, you know, almost 100% Tom McFarlane, and that's kind of what we're gearing ourselves for the next few issues as well, right? I've got one more to go, I think, where he's not inking himself, which is the next issue. Could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's how it goes, and we'll be able to compare from that issue to the one after where it's full McFarlane inks. Can't wait for that. So there you go, guys. That's my review of the Incredible Hulk issue 338. If you're still watching and you're subscribed, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your support. If you are not, please do so below. It helps the channel if you're watching the videos, and getting us closer to our goal of hitting 500 subscribers, where YouTube officially kind of recognizes us as a channel. So trying to get out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everyone you know. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and have an awesome day.
Like! Subscribe! Like! Subscribe!
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.